The story of my family history started with a man named Elias von Bergen, born in 1695. He lived in the Netherlands in a town called Altona, Holland. During this time, the Holy Roman Empire ruled Europe. The Roman Catholic Church was considered the state church of Europe. This was also the time that Reformation was taking place, and numerous religious groups began to question the church. Some Reformations started, including those led by Martin Luther, and another led by Menno Simons, who had been a Catholic priest but left the church. Menno Simons began a group known as the Mennonites, which played a major part in the Bergen story. It was during this time that the Catholic Church tried to quash all other religious groups, so a good number of Mennonites were torched, drowned, and burned at the stake. This led to them moving from the Netherlands to Prussia, now known as Poland. Here they developed a large colony and became very good at farming. The village where my ancestors lived was called Polsheim and was part of a colony of 48 other villages with up to 10,000 people. But soon they were out of land. This is when my fifth great-grandpa, Gerhard von Bergen, moved to Terek, Russia, which is close by the Caspian Sea. Gerhard von Bergen had 3 wives throughout his life, having 20 children, but 2 of them died at childbirth. When he moved to Russia, 15 villages were established in an area called Alexandrovka. Here was where they lived for a number of years, and where my great-great-grandfather was born. In his life, he had 13 children, with 2 dying at childbirth. Here are some photos of their family. By 1917, this area was no longer safe for my family to live in, as rebel groups called the Tatars and Chechens often raided the villages, killing and stealing villages and crops. Also during this time, Russian soldiers would often come by and terrorize the villages. It was during one of these times that my great-great-grandfather was then dragged out of his home to be killed by soldiers when neighboring Russian people that he associated with came and pleaded the soldiers to let him go. A short time later, as the rebel groups became more violent, a number of people in the village were killed, and the local people warned my grandfather that this was not a place to stay any longer. That evening, he found a knife stuck in his barn door by the rebels, which meant that he was next to die. Later that night, he packed up his family, taking as little possessions as he could fit, and began the trek back to Poland to see if they could re-establish a home. Although when they arrived in Poland, things were not much better, as World War I was in the progress and their village of Polsheim was often caught in the middle of fighting the Russian and German armies. And both of those groups ended up taking most of the food supply to their armies. When the war ended, the new communist government came in and took most of their farming land, and they were forced to work as laborers on farms that they had recently owned. Starvation became a major problem during this time, so a number of Mennonite families left to try to find a better life in Canada and the United States. It was at this time that my great-grandfather, John Bergen, was born in 1922. Life for my family was very difficult, with many people dying or being taken away from their homes. By 1925, my great-great-grandfather made the decision to try to get to Canada to escape this madness. He packed up once again with 10 of his children and went by train to a northern port in Russia. From there they sailed to England and then on to Canada, arriving on October 16, 1925. At this time in Canada, the Prime Minister was William Lyon Mackenzie King. He was the one that started the railway agreement because of labor shortages. When they arrived in Canada, they were sponsored by the CPR Railroad, who paid their travel expenses with the understanding that they would be paid back for these costs once they were able to establish themselves in Canada. The first place in Canada that they went to is Herbert, Saskatchewan, but only stayed for a short 6 weeks when they then moved on to southern Alberta. They settled in the Chinook, Alberta area where they farmed until 1936, when the Great Drought forced them to move to central Alberta to a town called Tofield. This is where my grandpa, Rodney Bergen, was born, along with 6 other children. In 1971, he moved to Saskatchewan, where he met my grandma, Shirley Collins. They were married in 1974 in Regina, where my mom and aunt were born. In 1984, the 4 of them moved to Saskatoon, where my uncle was born. To end this special story, I was born in Saskatoon on August 13th, 1999. And though there are many years and generations to come, I am thankful for those who came before me. Like Madeleine L'Eagle says, if you don't recount your family history, it will be lost. Honor your own stories and tell them too. The tales may not seem very important, but they are what binds families and makes each of us who we are.